All right, let's see here. It is February 7th, 5:42 p.m. This is a CTC meeting without a quorum, but we're going to go ahead and record for the record, and I guess this is an informal chat. We don't have anything to vote on. No votes will be taken. And then Ruben will bring up his Gmail because he's the one that said, hey, here are the things we should talk about. Richard, to start off with the question you were just asking, so the presentation I made to the select board,
Yes.
I asked for permission to work with Max to get a planning grant, or to start working getting a planning grant through the Island Institute, so we could put a price tag on building a fiber network through all of Waldoboro. And it was very vague. There are a bunch of places that could go, but we need to start with a price tag. And to do that, we're gonna talk with the Island Institute, describe what we want, see what makes sense. That's why they're there. They're gonna guide us on that. Once we have that solid number, we'll say, okay, now that we have a price tag for X, how do we fill that? How do we pay for it? Is there a grant that will pay for it? Do we need to put something, just a bond that goes out to vote to pay for it? We have to place out all those things. So the support we asked for is not guaranteeing a specific thing. It's letting the select board know what we're up to, so we don't, come at them and surprise them later, and to explain why we're going after that grant. And that's as far as we've gotten. So we probably could have just done the work, but I wanted it on public record, what angle we were trying for, especially for the unserved folks that are still trying to get internet. So it's got to be easy to feel like no one's doing anything, and there's nothing we can do that's fast, but there is something we can do. So it was another way to kind of get that out there and say, hey, we're still thinking about this problem.
I just have one specific question, and
Sure.
is the funding going to be to pay for the study?
Yep.
For a group to do it, or to actually pay for the implementation of it if it happens?
Just the design. So it would
Okay.
be what will it cost us to build, X type of network, however that network would exist. And as we talk with Island Institute and sort of sit down and plan through that, we would describe what we want, see if that's, is that allowed, is that something we can do, and then find out what it would cost. And then once we have that, we would brainstorm how we get there, how can we pay for that, what's
So
feasible.
it will be a planning grant.
Yep, it's a planning grant, and it's designed to cover the whole town. We've got the remaining unserved homes in mind, but with the competition going on in the state right now, for Waldoboro, for the level of connectivity we do have, as far as I can tell, this is the best way to get those remaining folks connected, to get them onto something, and to introduce some other benefits. If you have two carriers competing, that could have better pricing somewhere. The barrier of entry on internet right now is $40-50 for the first year, and then it goes up, and then it's 60 to 70. To some people that sounds normal, but your average working class person, that's a big deal. Every dollar counts. So that and a lot of other benefits are secondary. It's really just about, look, what's it going to cost to get here? And we might look at it and go, we can't do this, but we're going to get the data and have a clear public answer.
Feasibility studies, planning grants like this is always a good step, and this was something that I did want us to do for the long-term vision. So I'm glad Ruben was taking that initiative while I was out. We were doing a very similar, well, not a planning grant, but we were doing a feasibility study for a utility expansion that would have been on Route 1 anyways, just because we want to see if it's possible before spending hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars on a project, only to be told halfway through, oh, you can't do this because this problem came up. The planning grant shows how much it's going to cost and if it's possible to do it. And then once we have that information, we can go to the voters and say, it's going to cost this amount of money to do it, regardless of who's going to be with it. Is this something you want to fund? Because when we were initially talking about doing surveys and having things go out, we could have done one where we tell residents, it's going to cost, would you be fine with a $3 million bond for internet? That's not a solid number. That's us just throwing a number out there. Could have gone higher. So planning is always a good one. I'm saying that as a planner. And the other thing is, we're also doing that planning grant. Connect Maine still has their infrastructure Connect Maine grants that's due next month on the 21st. I'm going to work with Charter, LCI, and then Flanders and Storm Mountain to get those areas grant submission because they're very patient people.
They really are.
And when I looked at the grant this time, it wasn't a clear-cut thing of the scoring rubric we dealt with last time. It was more priority focused. With one of the bigger priorities were areas that do not even have 25 down, 3 up service, which is these 2 spots. And I think with the cost of getting it done, I think with the fact that they're not serviced by anything at all except spotty wireless and satellite service, I think they probably have one of the better chances right now. Whether that means they need LCI and charter to say what we're going to lay out there will get you 100 symmetrical service, or if we need to now beg the state a lot more, that's going to be something I'm going to have to find out.
I have a nuts and bolts question. The application for a planning grant, does that differ in a great scope than the grant for money?
For infrastructure, yeah, it usually is, because the planning one is you starting from square one. So we have to show that it's somewhat of a need. Like, we've done some very minor groundwork to show that this is a need, and that we'll have a little bit of money to then help with the match. But really what a planning grant does is hire more of a consultant or someone who's more experienced in this field who will also be covering any costs they have. Like, we might hire a consultant who's going to do surveys they're going to send out to anyone, or they're going to send someone to drive up and down all of Waldboro to look at all the poles, to take notes of everything. Whereas the infrastructure grant is we're hiring the labor, we're hiring labor, we're getting all the equipment. They have to fix any last minute damages that they didn't account for, and that's why the planning is so important, because if there's a pole that's not working and they need to fix it, we need to know that beforehand, or else that's going to be a new expense. So those are the two, that's the main differences between the two.
Good. Sounds doable.
It always sounds doable.
I feel like we can actually get there.
Yeah. Just takes time.
Yeah, and once we get the grant, that will also tell us, so with the Island Institute, the other thing that I said to the select board is, when we work on that, they may come up with we'll give you this much, but you have to match this much, and we can match with dollars, or we can match with time and services that have already been rendered by a Max or I or the CTC. And that will also affect what direction we go, because you could do this in partnership with an ISP, in which case that ISP would own the data, or you could do it so you own the data and you can shop it around. That will get more complicated because you would need to address that to what each ISP has out there. And that's part of what would be going to the Island Institute for. They've done this before. The three of us can sit here and talk about upload and download and the things we've seen. But our friends over there have been through this specific piece, and I think there'll be some good value there. This will focus on wire to the home, which is, this group is what we've been doing. But I've seen a lot of talk locally and on a wider scale about what's called a WISP, which is wireless ISP, which is not just satellite, it's also cellular 5G, or what Red Zone does. And it's my opinion, and we'll see what the Island Institute has to say on what these grants do, but a wireless ISP is always a last resort, and is always complemented by a dense fiber network to reach the 0.1% that you couldn't, if you couldn't run a cable 4 miles up the road.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want to have better cellular connectivity in your town for everything from emergency services to commerce. So I think that's one of the states, is whatever we go with, I think needs to be a wired medium. There's no local argument about that, but some of the companies that sell those products are getting more aggressive. And having seen Waldeboro deal with what used to be Midcoast Internet and some red zone issues, I find myself highly defensive of our remaining unconnected folks.
Yeah.
Flanders is a great example. I guess they still have red zone out there, but
They do, but there was an interesting...
if someone sneezes,
Flanders?
Flanders Corner, the southern end of Flanders Corner, which is interesting, because I talked with someone there recently about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, when I talked to Red Zone, they said we use the Store Mountain Tower,"
Mm-hmm.
to which I was confused a bit because I thought like 2-3 years ago, Store Mountain came to us wanting the fiber connection because the tower that's on the road was decommissioned.
You know who will tell us about that real quick?
I did actually talk to them about
Oh,
that,
you-
and
okay.
the tower's gone. So this person on Flanders saying, "Oh, we're on the Store Mountain Tower." Red Zone apparently doesn't know what they're talking about now.
Well, I mean, most people have no idea what they're looking at in terms of tech, and who knows how updated Red Zone's maps are. If someone told me what cellular tower I was talking to, even with the stuff I know, I'd disagree with them because I haven't the slightest idea what the server side antenna looks like. I could be next to it and not know I was there.
That's fair.
So, that's interesting. I'm sure the folks on store would be very excited to have any kind of thing there.
Yeah.
If that ever does go offline, I'd like to get more data, which I guess would just be me driving out and poking at it. I want to see the tower that's out there, and I want to find out how the antenna's connected, whether it's a repeater or whether it's fed directly with media. Because there are, depending on who owns what and what's out there, there's options. There's nothing permanent, but there's stopgap things I'd like to ask questions about.
Okay.
That's really all the stuff I had for this.
And I mentioned the infrastructure grant that I'll
Yep.
go for.
Can we mix those? Can a phoenix rise out of those ashes? Can we make you happier about that?
I don't get it.
Well, part of the infrastructure thing with that you're presenting to the EDC and the select board, you wanted to have a commercial area up on the hill. And
Oh
we couldn't
yeah.
because of wetlands and stuff.
Oh yeah, that was unfortunate.
Can we combine that with any of these efforts to? Because it doesn't just have to be about internet, right? Can we put any of that together? Is there something we can reclaim from that?
Well, it means we're not spending so much money on that project anymore because we were doing an initial planning study. So,
Mhm.
it just means we're not spending all the money on that area anymore. So
Well,
we
that's
can
good.
hold that for a future economic project in the future.
Alright.
Because what was going to fund it was TIF money, which the town does have. So in the future, if we do this town-wide fiber network, we could bond the TIF money with it. So that's
Okay.
something that could be used in the future.
And I guess that's part of what I was wondering is, are there opportunities like that? It's you worked so hard on that. So if we can give you something back, you did so much work for that and thought so hard about it.
Well, I think there's some ways it could still be saved, but for internet right now,
Mhm.
as I say, I'm focusing on that infrastructure grant for those two roads, and I'm talking with LCI and Charter to try and just make it so we can at least get an application in, because maybe we have a 1 in a million chance to get it, and I want to take that 1 in a million chance. And then while I'm doing that, it shouldn't interfere with the Island Institute grant
Mhm.
that you want us to go for. So just working on the short term and long term.
Yeah. I mean, if something needs to change, we can roll with the punches.
Yeah.
We'll do what we need to do.
Do we feel that the competition between towns in Maine for this grants, is that lessening? Has there been more money put forth or interest
There
in
is
providing service?
There is more money coming down the pipeline, both through the Connect Maine as well as through the infrastructure bill. I think USDA has their own specific broadband network grant process thing, whatever it's called. I'm blanking out today. And
Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, is that what it is?
I think it's called Reconnect.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, I think what it is, there's some towns that were taking steps ages ago because they knew internet was still important. Some private developers or private providers decided to make a very bold expansion early on, and so that's why some towns didn't even think about this for a while. And then, some towns are seeing private providers trying to do expansions now on their own because either they're just getting money from the federal government or they think that's still valuable to try and get in now before towns start doing all these things. I think I heard about one fiber provider or no, who is it? GWI, they're doing, I think, 5 towns in Maine, and I think that's through a federal grant, but it's not like you're gonna see those 5 towns applying for a new grant at this point, because GWI is now going in there. So I think to answer your question of if they're listening, it's hard to say it because I think in our area, a lot of towns are served, but there's also just those few pockets throughout the entire, you have to think of the whole state of Maine. Some places barely have anything. Washington, just to the north of us, has DSL only. I think that's the only outlier I can think of in the Mid-Coast region. But you go central, northern Maine, it's a completely different story.
Where are we with the argument of between fiber and just some sort of service?
It depends on who you ask. There's always a dissenting voice that says, hey, we've got enough bandwidth or this other technology will work. The sort of Venn diagram of people who say that and people that have a real good handle on how data moves and what you can do with it are two separate circles. So I've heard a few individual voices that are kind of loud that say, hey, this is good enough, we can go to something else. They're a minority voice. And none of it comes from a bad place. You know, there are people that, you know, hey, we don't need to get more tax money to build this thing. I get you. I also own land. That's fair. And we're not promising we're going in that direction either. We also are being loud that we haven't taken anything off the table. The other thing I see in a lot of towns, and I heard this at the last,
Select board?
no, not the last select board. Well, at this last select board, I'm thinking of once a month there's a Maine Broadband Authority
Oh, yeah.
video call. And one of the things they're pointing out is this isn't going to happen for towns that wait for something to happen. You need local involvement. You need cheerleaders. You need people driving this. And that's why I want to go forward with any small thing we can do. You know, even if it's a planning grant or whatever. It's part of what they're looking for is people that want to work for this a little bit.
This will imply that there's an interest, enough of an interest in this.
Right.
Yeah.
By applying for grants, even though the chances of getting one are not that great.
And it's a really big problem. How do you solve it? And part of that, you look for people that can help you get the work done. So, if we go to someone with a plan and price, that's going to mean less effort on the other end as they process all that stuff through. If we get it done all at once, we then take ourselves out of that competition. And what you were saying, Max, are the towns that are already doing that, to their credit, they're removing themselves from that competition. They're getting everyone served and getting out of the way for other people. I'd like to put us in that same place.
Yep.
I think some of the stuff that you've been working on with various groups, like Storer Mountain Group and so on, is a good way to approach too.
It's always good getting, what's great is that for the unserved pockets, you know the names of the last few people.
Yeah.
Like you can literally call them, email them. Well, you could email them. And like for this last week, I have literally been coordinating and calling these people rather than doing what I've done in the past of just, I've sent out letters. I've literally been talking with them saying, I do want to do this. I need to know you're involved with this because I want to get this done. And they said, yes, we do want it. Call us, tell us what you need, and they're being more active at least. And I can try and at least coordinate a better long-term project for them.
And that's what we're going to need is that community support as we go forward. Speaking of support, I feel like it's almost an elephant in the room. This is our second meeting without a quorum. So I'm at least going to send, I guess, Julie a question. I don't know how long we wait before we ask if something needs to change. My preference is to ask that question right away because I want to keep this work going. But right now, if we needed to make a decision, like Max and I are, by Max and I mean like 98% Max, are working on these grant things.
Yeah.
And at some point, we'll need a decision made. So the plan was to go, okay, we've got our grant requested. Which part of the puzzle do you want to work on? Do you want to describe a bond? Do you want to describe a public-private? Do you want to describe a muni network? What do you want to do? Without a voting group, we can't do that. So I'm going to ask for some direction because, if that needs to go back to being part of the EDC or it needs to go back to some other method, I don't want the lack of a regular group that can vote on something to prevent that work from moving forward. And that was why I went to the select board, because I needed someone's permission. Or at least I wanted to, I don't know if I needed it or not, but I always err
Well,
on
you're the chair,
assuming I do.
You're the chair, you can do whatever you
Yeah.
want.
Oh yeah, I haven't stabbed anyone, so.
Not yet.
No, I like it here.
I mean, personally, a committee should always be when there's so much overwhelming work, and it's good to have that group to discuss it. I mean, when I first was, I was a year in, and then when I started coming to these meetings, we still had chapel to deal with. We were talking, there were talks of long-term strategies, but we were also talking about all the spots left, and there was this idea that we could always keep seeing the grants to try and fill in the gaps, and to talk more with LCI and Charter, and to have this public forum, to have all the people come in and say, we are unserved, we need help. Chapel's done, hooray. And we do have our two pockets, but it's, grants, I did the one workshop where I was telling y'all how it was done. The town has fiber and cable throughout. I think once we do get the planning grant for it, and if there is interest in the town to do this town-wide network, then I think there is more we can come to these meetings and discuss. But until then, I think it's more of just I'm trying to get the grants.
So, yeah, so tonight or tomorrow, sometime this week, I'll shoot an email off. I'll just send it to Julia with my question, and she can direct me to where to go. I'll try to do that tonight. I think, is there a select board meeting tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I'll try to get that done tonight in case you need to ask that question tomorrow. Yeah.
I mean, for other topics, I mean, Tom, when he was here, he was at least bringing in a new topic of discussion with the Dig Once policy, which unfortunately can't be incorporated to that project I was gonna do because everything that happened. And then I'm trying to think of we keep talking about like downtown public Wi-Fi, we keep talking about, some information methods so that people who have the potential to do it can still do it, but
Well, the beauty of change is you don't have to, it's not like you have to make one change and never make another change again.
Right.
So if we need to spin this back down to being part of, the original parent group, and if we come up with enough work where we need to spin up a separate group later, hooray, we can do that. We can ask for help. And hopefully if we get that big, there will be enough interest to get some people in. I like seeing all the people I see, but it's been the same group for a little bit. And, it's, maybe we need some catalyst to change here. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
So I'll send that question out. None of that's bad news. We're still going to keep working on the internet.
Right. Okay.
Well, if I had some other bombastic thing to say, this is where I'd say it. I'm mostly happy that it's only 6:05 and I don't have to be at the gym till 7:30, so that's pretty cool.
So are we good to close the meeting?
If there were 3 people here, we'd vote on it, but yeah, we're fine.